Marie-Françoise Thérèse Martin was born on January 2nd, 1873, and baptized 2 days later on January 4th. 21-year-old Thérèse described her earliest memories of home life in France.
All my life, God surrounded me with love. My first memories are imprinted with the most tender smiles and caresses. Those were the sunny years of my childhood.
Generations of Catholics who have admired this young saint called her the Little Flower and found in her short life more inspiration for their own lives than in volumes written by theologians. Yet Thérèse died when she was only 24 years old, after having lived as a cloistered Carmelite nun for less than 10 years. She never went on missions, never founded a religious order, never performed great works. The only book of hers, published after her death, was a brief edited version of her journal called Story of a Soul. Within 28 years of her death, the public demand was so great that she was finally canonized. Thérèse was born in Lisieux, France, 1873, the pampered daughter of a mother, a talented lace maker, who had wanted to be a saint, and a father, a watchmaker by trade, who had wanted to be a monk. The two married, but were determined that they would be celibate, until a priest told them one day that that was not how God wanted a marriage to work. Within the next 15 years, Zélie Martin bore 9 children, 7 girls and 2 boys.
We lived only for them. They were all our happiness. Zélie Martin.
The Martins' delight in their children turned to shock and sorrow as tragedy relentlessly and mercilessly stalked their little ones. Within 3 years, Zélie's 2 baby boys, a 5-year-old girl and a 6.5-week-old infant girl, all died. Zélie was left numb with sadness, but her faith sustained her through these terrible ordeals. In a letter to her sister-in-law who had lost an infant son, Zélie remembered,
When I closed the eyes of my dear little children and buried them, I felt sorrow through and through. People said to me, it would have been better never to have had them. I couldn't stand such language. My children were not lost forever. Life is short and full of miseries, and we shall find our little ones again, up above.
The Martins' last child was born January 2nd, 1873. She was weak and frail, and doctors feared for the infant's life. The family, now so used to death, was preparing for yet another blow. Zélie wrote of her 3-month-old girl,
I have no hope of saving her. The poor little thing suffers horribly. It breaks your heart to see her.
But the baby girl proved to be much tougher than anyone realized and survived the illness. And a year later,
The baby is full of life, giggles a lot, and is sheer joy to everyone.
death seemed to grant a reprieve to the Martin household. Although suffering had left its mark on mother and father, it was not the scar of bitterness. Louis and Zélie had already found relief and support in their faith. The series of tragedies had intensified the love of Louis and Zélie Martin for each other. They poured out their affections on their 5 surviving daughters. Louis and Zélie named their newborn Marie-Françoise Thérèse Martin. A century later, people would know her as Saint Thérèse and call her the Little Flower. Tragedy and loss came quickly to Thérèse when her mother died of breast cancer when she was only 4.5 years old. Her 16-year-old sister Pauline became her second mother, which made the second loss even worse when Pauline entered a Carmelite convent 5 years later. A few months later, Thérèse became so ill with a fever that people thought she was dying. When Thérèse saw her sisters praying to a statue of Mary in her room, Thérèse also prayed. She saw Mary smile at her, and suddenly she was cured. She tried to keep the grace of the cure secret, but people found out and badgered her with questions about what Mary was wearing, what she looked like. When she refused to give in to their curiosity, they said that she had made the whole thing up. Without realizing it, by the time she was 11 years old, she had developed the habit of mental prayer. She would find a place between her bed and the wall, and in that solitude think about God, life, and eternity. When her other sisters, Marie and Leonie, had left to join the religious orders, Thérèse was left alone with her last sister, Céline, and her father. Thérèse tells us that she wanted to be good, but that she had an odd way of going about it. This little spoiled queen of her father's would not do any housework. She thought that if she made the beds, she was doing a great favor. Every time Teray even imagined that someone was criticizing her or did not appreciate her, she would burst into tears. Then she would cry because she had cried. Any inner wall she built to contain her wild emotions crumpled immediately before the tiniest comment. Teray wanted to enter the Carmelite convent to join Pauline and Marie, but how could she convince others that she could handle the rigors of Carmelite life if she could not handle her own emotional outbursts? She had prayed that Jesus would help her, but there was no sign of an answer. On Christmas Day in 1886, the 14-year-old hurried home from church. In France, young children left their shoes by the hearth at Christmas, and then parents would fill them with gifts. By 14, most children outgrew this custom, but her sister Celine did not want Teray to grow up, so they continued to leave presents in baby Teray's shoes. As she and Celine climbed the stairs to take off their hats, their father's voice rose up from the parlor below. Standing over the shoes, he sighed.
Thank goodness. That's the last time we should have this kind of thing. Always happy.
Something incredible had happened to Teray. Jesus had come into her heart and done what she could not do herself. He made her more sensitive to her father's feelings than her own. She swallowed her tears, walked slowly down the stairs, and exclaimed over the gifts in the shoes, as if she had never heard a word her father had said. The following year, she entered the convent. In her autobiography, she referred to this Christmas as her conversion. Teray would be known as the Little Flower, but she had a will of steel. When the superior of the Carmelite convent refused to take Teray because she was so young, the formerly shy little girl went to the bishop. And when the bishop also said no, she decided to go over his head as well. Her father and sister took her on a pilgrimage to Rome to try to get her mind off this crazy idea. Finally, they went for an audience with the Pope. They had been forbidden to speak to him, but that didn't stop Teray. As soon as she got near him, she begged that he let her enter the Carmelite convent. She had to be carried out by 2 of the guards. But the vicar general, who had seen her courage, was impressed, and soon Teray was admitted to the Carmelite convent that her sisters Pauline and Marie had already joined. Her romantic ideas of convent life and suffering soon met up with reality in a way she had never expected. Her father suffered a series of strokes that left him affected not only physically but mentally. When he began hallucinating and grabbed for a gun as if going into battle, he was taken to an asylum for the insane. Horrified, Teray learned of the humiliation of the father she adored and admired, and of the gossip and pity of their so-called friends. As a cloistered nun, she could not visit her father. This began a horrible time of suffering when she experienced such dryness in prayer that she stated,
Jesus isn't doing much to keep the conversation going.
She was so grief-stricken that she often fell asleep in prayer. She consoled herself by saying that mothers love children when they lie asleep in their arms, so that God must love her when she slept during prayer. She knew as a Carmelite nun she would never be able to perform great deeds.
Love proves itself by deeds. So how am I to show my love? Great deeds are forbidden me. The only way I can prove my love is by scattering flowers. And these flowers are every little sacrifice, every glance and word, and the doing of the least actions for love.
She took every chance to sacrifice, no matter how small it would seem. She smiled at the sisters she didn't like. She ate everything that she was given without complaining, so much so that she was often given the worst leftovers. One time she was accused of breaking a vase when she was not at fault. Instead of arguing, she sank to her knees and begged forgiveness. These little sacrifices cost her more than bigger ones, for those went unrecognized by others. No one told her how wonderful she was for these little secret humiliations and good deeds.